What's up, everybody? Welcome back. UFC 270 pay-per-view card, best bets, picks, lineup advice, FanDuel, DraftKings, all the strategies you need for tomorrow's card. Cyril Gane, Francis Ngannou, Brandon Moreno, Deiveson Figueiredo. What's up? I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy. We're going to be here for about 15 minutes breaking down the card, mostly from a DFS perspective, some bets sprinkled in there. Let's bring in Jake the Snake, owner of MMA DFS.com, writer of the Daily Plug at OccupyFantasy.com. Jake, what's up, buddy?
A whole lot, man. Fun card. Kind of sucked we lost that Taporia fight, but it is what it is. And we also lost the Vieira fight, but still got 11, so fingers crossed we keep the rest of them.
I will say, at least we didn't lose any of the 8 newcomers. Pretty crazy card from that perspective. We have 2 5-round fights, a bunch of people making their UFC debut, which actually makes this a really interesting pay-per-view card. A lot of times the pay-per-view cards are tougher from a DFS perspective with more known fighters, but we do not get that this week. So again, we're going to break down the main events, what they mean from a DFS perspective, talk about profiles for each of these new eight newcomers, and we'll give our fights that we want to target in DFS and then a couple bets here at the end of the show. If you like what you see, make sure you subscribe to the channel, get notified when we go live for any sports here on Occupy Fantasy's YouTube channel or when we upload any MMA or UFC videos. Give us that thumbs up if you like the UFC content. Any questions you have about the slate, comment on the video below. We'll try to get back to you before it locks tomorrow. Best way, though, is to join our Discord server. Link is in the description below to chat with Jake and other members of the OccupyFantasy.com community. So, Jake, 2 5-rounders. We have a heavyweight battle, Ngannou and Gane. We have literally exact opposite in 2 flyweights with Moreno and Figueredo. Before we dive into those individual fights, we've talked about this a couple times in the past, but again, just to call this out, Jake did put together a bunch of trends from 2021. Go check it out, his premium work at MMADFS.com. And in there, Jake, you talk about some of these multi-5-round fight cards. So for 2 5-rounders like we have for this slate, what does that generally mean from a DFS perspective for tournaments and cash games?
It's sort of interesting. We actually had 3 of these recently. So just looking back to October 30th, November 6th, and December 11th, those were all 2 5-round fight cards. Honestly, they all got a little bit weird. So the first 2 of those, we had fight stacks, which never recommend, super bizarre. The reason that happened is the first one of those, only 2 underdogs won on the entire slate. The second one, only 1 underdog won on the entire slate. So we ended up seeing Peter Yan and Sandhagen stack make the winning lineup. And then the next week, insanely, we saw the Namajunas Wei Li fight stack make the optimal. So it's hard to take like a ton away from those 2, but basically the biggest takeaway is you want to have at least 1 5-round fighter. We definitely wouldn't recommend stacking. Those were very bizarre situations. Like you said, we have a ton of debuting fighters. We're not expecting, just every single favorite to win. There should be a lot more chaos on this slate, but it was pretty nuts. And then the third one of those, super crazy as well. That was the Amanda Nunes complete disaster fight against Juliana Pena. And then Poirier against Oliveira. And insanely, we saw both underdogs win on that slate, and neither one ended up in the winning lineup. Pena was in the optimal lineup, but she was only 4% owned, and no one hit the optimal. And Oliveira ended up not quite scoring enough to crack the winning lineup. So we've seen some weird stuff going on, but since Pena was in the optimal lineup, I think it's fair to say you always want to have at least one of these 5-round fighters on these 2 fight cards.
That totally makes sense, and it's still a sore spot for that Poirier fight for me, but we'll move on. So let's talk about these 2 5-rounders and what it means. These specifically, Ngannou and Gane, Moreno and Figueredo. We'll start with the first one that's going to fight is the flyweight championship with Moreno and Figueredo. These 2 guys, tons of action. How do you expect it to play out for DFS?
This is the trilogy fight with Moreno and Figueredo. I'm on Figueiredo again. He looked great on the scales. He looked terrible last time, so it was not surprising at all that he looked terrible in the fight. The first time they fought, it ended up being a draw, but, either guy would have scored enough to be in the winner most likely. That time, Figueiredo was way more expensive, so possibly he would have been left out, but I believe Moreno would have scored like 110 and Figueiredo would have scored like 98. So, both decent scores. And, this is going to be a high volume fight. Still a pretty good chance for a finish. If you look at the odds, it's still got a 58% implied chance for a finish. So, high volume plus a finish. Winner's going to score really well. We get Figueiredo, the cheapest you're ever going to see him right here. So while I think it's a little bit of a buy low spot with, everyone's on Moreno, or a lot of people are on Moreno because he won the last fight and just pure recency bias, Figueiredo is going to be owned just because of his price. Like, people are going to see that price and it's going to be hard to overlook it. So I think we're going to see both guys pretty similarly owned, whereas Figueiredo was the more popular of the two in the last two fights. But 7,700 Figueiredo, if he wins, it's really, really hard to see him getting left out of tournament lineups there. And for low risk lineups, I think you want to stack that fight. And you can actually do it on FanDuel and DraftKings this week. FanDuel reduced the pricing on their 5-round fights for maybe the first time ever.
Yeah, Figueiredo only $14 over there. So again, that's definitely the fight to stack in low risk. Now, this heavyweight, Ngannou and Gane, not playing either one of these guys is probably the scariest 5 to 10 moments of a sweat you'll ever have in MMA DFS. But Jake, you have to expect, just based on the profile of Ngannou and what Gane does in fights, that this is a tougher fight if we don't see an early finish to get there, and it makes for an interesting decision, not only just for high risk contests but for low risk contests as well.
Absolutely, man. I talked about it in the write-ups, where basically both guys need a knockout in the first 2 rounds to be useful here. Ngannou has never gotten a finish beyond the first 2 rounds. He kind of he slows down a little bit after that, so we don't really expect him to get a finish beyond that. So that's part of the reason why he needs one in the first 2. And Gane, it's going to be harder for him to return value beyond the second round. We look at his last, his last 3 fights, and 5 of his last 6 have made the third round. Francis, like I said, he's never gotten a finish beyond the second, and neither one of these guys has ever been finished themselves. So, that is just one more reason why it's a little bit less likely we see that quick finish. But then we can look at Gane's 5-round decision scores, 85 and 94 DraftKings points. Maybe a 94, maybe that's close at 8,400 on DraftKings, but there's still a pretty good chance that, if he gets a decision win, we see a little bit less volume against a monster like Ngannou. And we could see that come in even lower. We could see Gane score 80 points in a decision and get left out. And I think the same is probably true about a later round finish. You look at his last 3rd round finish, scored 89 points against Lewis. I think there are a lot of ways that Gane could win this fight and score in the 80s. And I think that's honestly probably the most likely outcome. You're not going to get in some crazy striking battle against Francis. Definitely the scariest man on earth, and it's not close. So I think Gane's going to come in really smart. We're going to see lower volume. He's just got the bigger cage that's going to benefit Gane. I think he's going to try to stay in space, use a lot of kicks, and just kind of wait for Francis to slow down. Francis is going to be doing the exact opposite. He's going to be trying to catch Gane early on with some bombs and trying to get that finish early. But, if we look at their ownership, they're both in the low 40%, and then we look at the implied odds that they get a finish in the first 2 rounds, and then they're in the low 20%. That's a huge gap right there. That's a lot of leverage on going under on these guys, either fading them all together or just going under the field and just kind of, playing it for the first 2-round finish. But like you said, man, it's a scary 10 minutes with these two guys swinging hams at each other.
If you had just one lineup, would you fade this main event?
I think you have to.
I agree. I totally agree. Totally agree for all the reasons that you mentioned. And just real quick for low risk, right? Normally a 5-round fight, 2 5-rounders. We're stacking both fights, filling the last 2 spots with favorites. But you and I were tossing this back and forth earlier today. To me, it is crazy as it sounds because he's the underdog and because of his profile. I think Ngannou is the safer low-risk fighter. He has a higher floor because he has way less likelihood of getting finished in the first 2 rounds, unlike Gane.
No, it's totally true. And he's cheaper, so, in low risk, he lets you do a little bit more with your lineup. I think that's a great point. We talked about you can play 4, you can play all 4 of the 5-round fighters, but you can definitely play 3 and then build kind of a super low-risk lineup. And I think you can do some really interesting things there with just 3 of them and leaving out, Gane. Or if you really like Gane, you could leave out Ngannou. But I think you can really do some interesting things leaving out Gane in low risk, which is crazy to say.
Absolutely, yeah, it is really crazy to say, but I agree with you. So let's talk about these newcomers. This is where the card is gonna be won or lost in DFS and probably in betting as well. So I'm gonna bring up the Occupy model here. Ranks every fighter, FanDuel, DraftKings, based on all of our back tested metrics. Has helped produce countless GPP winners. So Jake, 8 newcomers. We'll try to get through this quickly because I imagine a lot of people don't even know who these fighters are. But we'll give you, this is what I'll do. I'll throw the name out there, Jake. You give me just a quick profile on what their fighting style is like, their experience, and maybe what their chances are of winning this fight.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going from DraftKings salary highest to lowest, and the highest newcomer is Jack Della Maddalena against Pete Rodriguez. They're fighting each other, so let's just talk about both these guys.
Yeah, so Jack Della, as they call him, on the Australian scene. I don't know where the Maddalena came from. I'm gonna stick with Della. 5-time Eternal MMA welterweight champ. It's the same promotion that Casey O'Neill came out of. The guy's 10-2 on a 10-fight winning streak. He is a Dana White Contender Series fighter. That was his first time ever going to the judges. Was his recent Contender Series fight. Before that, he had 9 straight finishes. Really solid boxer and pretty good defensive grappling, but really sharp with his hands. And he's going against another knockout threat in Pete Rodriguez, who's only 4-0, but all of those have come by round 1 KO. He has less than 5 minutes of total fight time in his pro career. He's been fighting at the Icon Fighting Federation against kind of some suspect talent. So I think we don't really know what we're going to get with Pete Rodriguez. Maybe he's someone that surprises you, and he's got heavy hands. He can knock people out, but he could also look terrible and gas out after 3 minutes, considering he's never been past the midway mark of the first round.
Yeah, it's funny because earlier in the week, you're like, wow, I got so much charting to do, but at least Pete Rodriguez won't take me that long to chart. So, all right, so next fighter making their debut, we still have to go all the way down to Michael Morales at 8,200. He's fighting UFC veteran Trevin Giles. So, Morales, Jake, also a Dana White Contender Series alum.
Yeah, also coming off a decision win on the Contender Series. He's 12-0, perfect record. I was actually pretty impressed by this guy. He's still just 22 years old, I believe. His previous 8 wins before the Contender Series all came early, and now he's going against Trevin Giles, who's decent, but moving down to 170 pounds for the first time definitely adds some uncertainty. I thought Morales had really sharp hands, and he's actually a former Ecuadorian national wrestling champion, so he has that to fall back on if he needs it. But pretty patient striker is the one concern for DFS is he might kind of start off slower and then potentially look for like a second round finish.
For sure, and the DraftKings and FanDuel OF Index reflect that potential in his fights. All right, moving down a little bit further, now we get to the very special underdogs on the card. Gennaro Valdez against Matt Fravolo, who got absolutely torched in like 3 seconds against Terrence McKinney in his last fight. What do you think about Valdez?
So, another guy coming in with a perfect 10-0 record, interesting 100% finishing rate, but really hasn't fought anybody. Even his Contender Series fight where he got a round 2 KO, he beat Carlton Minus's cousin, who was also on the Alaskan scene. So I think you got to take that win with a grain of salt. Valdez gassed out hard in the first round in that fight. So I think he has major cardio concerns. He's never been in a fight that lasted longer than 12 minutes. Seems pretty sloppy with his grappling and his striking, and he's only even been to the third round once. So I have major cardio concerns about him. I think that guy could be a little bit fraudulent.
Okay, fair enough. All right, next we got Jasmine Jazz is how it was pronounced in the weigh-in. So give me the rundown on Jasmine.
Yeah, I've just been calling her JJ, but props on that pronunciation.
Thank you.
So coming in 6-1, another Dana White Contender Series decision win. I feel like all these you always hear how you need to get a finish on Contender Series, but every single one
all decisions,
all decisions on this card. So pretty crazy. But her only loss came in a really questionable split decision, which is funny. It was like months ago we were talking about how this was questionable. When Elise Reed was making her UFC debut, we were charting this fight back then, and we were like, how did Reed win this fight? She got taken down 4 times. Anyways, Elise Reed, she's the one that came in and got knocked out in the first round by Sajara Eubanks. And that was the only time JJ has lost a fight. So, I mean, she's basically 7-0 practically. But freestyle wrestler, good grappling, not really good striking, not good hands. So she's not really much of a finisher. She's more of a ground and pound grappler than a submission type of play. So that automatically kind of makes her a better DraftKings play because we don't really see her getting a finish. But she has a massive 5-inch height and reach advantage. She's going against Kay Hansen, who hasn't fought in like 14 or 15 months and is moving up to 125 pounds for the first time in the UFC. So A lot of unknowns there. It's possible Jasmine just completely dominates Kay Hansen with the huge size advantage. So I think we were both saying she's pretty interesting, especially when you look at her low ownership and especially on DraftKings.
Give me the low-owned female fighter who is a grappler every day of the week in UFC DFS. But again, just to your point, and it seems like every profile has ended it with this way, is that it's a wide range of outcomes, super questionable, which makes it perfect for tournaments this week. We can leverage the ownership in that fashion. All right, Simon Oliveira is the next up. We still got a bunch more here, Jake, against Tony Gravely. Give me the rundown on Oliveira.
Shocking, coming off a split decision win on Contender Series, 18-3. He's never been finished. He's kind of a guillotine specialist. That's how he's gotten 7 of his wins. He's only had 2 decision wins, so 16 of his 18 wins have come early. Most of them by submission. He likes to push the pace, but he seems a little bit sloppy. He was throwing a lot of spinning back fists, flying knees, just kind of crazy techniques on the Contender Series. Really, I think he's just a guillotine threat in this fight, and he's got a really tough matchup against Tony Gravely.
Swear to God, if he guillotines Gravely, shooting for a takedown, it's going to be a disaster. All right, Andre Fialho, who took the fight on short notice last week against Michel Pereira, but that fight got pushed back. Now it's on this card. He's had a little bit longer to prepare for this. And when I first saw that he was making his debut, Jake, I didn't look at his profile or anything. I just assumed, a late notice fighter, probably doesn't have much experience. This guy's fought all over the world, has a ton of decent experience. But what do you think of him?
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of like a knockout or bust, questionable cardio guy. I think 11 of his wins have come by KO. Got 1 submission. 10 of those 12 finishes have come in the first round. I forget which fight I was watching, but gassed out really hard in the 3rd round and definitely made me nervous about his cardio. But not a Dana White Contender Series guy. One of the few newcomers who didn't come off the show. I don't know. I think he's got good power. I think that he doesn't really impress me that much, but I think he's definitely, a threat in most fights to land a knockout. But another guy with a really tough matchup. I think, one of those guys we're going to be more interested in his second fight for sure.
That makes a ton of sense. All right. We already talked about Pete Rodriguez, and we'll close out with Victor Henry, who, like Fialho, was scheduled to make a short notice debut against Barcelos, and that got pushed back to this UFC 270. So give me the rundown on Victor Henry.
Yeah, so he was supposed to fight like a month ago on short notice, so extra month to prepare, although I think he was the one that got COVID. I'm not sure if it was him or someone on his team, but either way, so he was dealing with that. But he's more of a journeyman, so a lot of these other guys are younger. He's 34. He's fought all over the world, I believe a decent amount in Japan, 21-5 record. He has a win over Kyler Phillips. That's kind of like the bright spot on his record, but it came in a decision, and he wasn't super impressive in the fight. I feel like this guy was just kind of a grinder, and we haven't really seen how he's going to look. And another guy with just a brutally tough matchup in his UFC debut. I mean, could a debut get any tougher than what this guy has? So, I mean,
no.
Maybe again we're looking at a second fight, but not really interested playing him against Barcelos.
Yeah, I mean, I would not want to face Barcelos off a loss for sure.
Right.
General,
angry Barcelos.
Definitely would not want to see that. All right, let's talk about fights we want to target, Jake, before we get out of here. Give me one fight that you're looking at both fighters in the fight that you think could help. Whoever wins could produce a great DFS score.
Yeah, I mean, the easy answer is the Jack Della Pete Rodriguez fight, and the under the radar answer I think is the Hansen Jasmine JJ fight.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you there. And you said you prefer Jack Della and you prefer JJ in those 2 fights?
I definitely prefer Jack Della. I've been going back and forth on Hansen and JJ, but I think, once you factor in the price, I definitely prefer JJ on DraftKings for sure. I think it's a little bit tougher for her on FanDuel, but she's so cheap that she could still be a value play. But I don't know. I think I prefer JJ, but honestly, I started the day much preferring her, and then I was watching Hansen. I was like, man, I think Hansen kind of finishes Jasmine in the 3rd round, which kind of had me evening out on the 2. I'm going to be over on both of them. I could see either Jasmine winning a decision or a Hansen submitting her in the 3rd round. I mean, that's how I see this fight playing out.
Either way, both would probably be useful. And again, like you said, both are low owned, so it's easy to get over on them if you're making multiple lineups. So, all right, Jake, we'll close out the show with our stream parlay. We're 0 for 1 to start 2022, so it's time to get back in the green here. I'm going to start. We talked about the Barcelos fight against Henry. I'll take Barcelos by KO. I believe it's plus 210 at the book you listed in the plug, so that's my side.
That is correct. And, we just talked about it. I really like Kay Hansen to get a third round finish if she does win. I'm not saying she necessarily will. I think Jasmine has a really good shot to win the decision. But you look at Kay Hansen, 6 of her 7 wins have come early. I believe her last 5 have all ended in the third round. So at plus 1,400, I kind of like those odds. So I'm going to take a flyer on Hansen round 3. Winning's overrated. So let's go $20 to win 930. That's a plus 45.50 odds on that parlay.
That will give us a pretty sweet bankroll to throw out some crazy parlays for the rest of the year. So let's win that. If you like that, go ahead and throw it out and let us know in our Discord if you decided to bet that. And again, join our Discord server. Click the join button below this video. Get access to the OccupyFantasy.com community. Chat with us. Sweat the fights with us tomorrow. We're in there chatting NFL all day too. So come join us. Again, go follow Jake on Twitter at DFS_MMA. Go to MMADFS.com. Read the sheet where he breaks down every single fight on the card from a betting and DFS perspective. You got to go check out his exclusive content on Patreon and especially his 2021 UFC DFS Trends Guide, invaluable information for making DFS tournament lineups. Give us a follow, Occupy Fantasy. Follow me at Brian Jester FF. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Click the subscribe button right below this video. Get notified we go live. Upload any new videos. Give us that thumbs up if you like the UFC content and want to see more. Any questions, hop in Discord. Or if you just love YouTube so much, you can comment on this video too. Believe me, it helps our engagement. So we appreciate that either way. We'll try to get back to you before the fights start on Saturday evening. So for Jake, I'm Brian. Appreciate you all listening. Good luck and enjoy the fights.